Perfect. Yes, please. Thank you very much. These are the pros of being a moderator. Your speakers are always very nice. Thank you very much to all of you for being here with us. Thank you to all in the room. This is the Science for Life session, so I hope you're in the right room. If not, there should be a map outside. So, what must Europe do to create the next generation of game changers? Now, this is a big question. We have more or less an hour to discuss with our distinguished panelists. I will just present them, and then I think we can get started. So I'm really happy to introduce Karl Johan Sundberg, who's Dean at North Campus at Karolinska Institutet. We have Angel Font Vidal, Associate General Director and Research and Fellowships at La Caixa Foundation. Lotte Vierre Knudsen, good, Chief Scientific Advisor of Research and Early Development at Novo Nordisk. Gintaras Valinčius, I hope that was also good, Chairman of the Lithuanian Research Council, and Flamena Markova, Chief of International Relations at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. So thank you all for being here. Now, without further ado, I think I'm going to start with a question it's easy for me to ask, but maybe not so easy to answer. And Lotte, the question is for you. You have been the mind behind one of the most recent revolutions, I would say, in medicinal development in the world. Now, the question is, we know, and everyone's always talking about how innovative other markets compared to Europe are, but why did this happen in Europe at Novo Nordisk? I mean, we're lucky that you are Danish, but beyond that, what do you think were the conditions that made it possible for it to happen here?
Yes, thank you very much, and delighted to be here. And if not everyone knows what you're talking about, then it's these new medicines for the treatment of diabetes and obesity, where I have been one of the early inventors in the field and have worked with it now for 35 years. So I would say, three things why that could happen here. That is funding, it's patience, and risk willingness. And if I may expand a little bit on that, no one can do anything that translates to an actual product without having funding. So I have been in a big pharma company, and all of my career I came there straight out of university. So I've actually never lacked funding. Doesn't mean I haven't been challenged, but I've never actually lacked funding, and that's I think a really important way to actually be able to translate something. And then I mentioned risk willingness, right? And now everyone knows about these medicines and everyone wants to be part of it. But I have to say I worked on it for over 30 years and there were not a lot of people who wanted that. So I was in a company where even though the previous CEO said that he didn't personally believe in making medicines for the treatment of obesity, his scientists said that could be a future important thing. So even though all the other farmers, they ran away, no one wanted to make these kind of medicines. Obesity wasn't defined as a disease. It was perceived to be potentially dangerous because other of the older medicines had cardiovascular side effects, or some of the newer ones either didn't work or they had suicidal side effects. Still, we kept going for 25 years, and now I think many people in Europe know my current CEO, Lars Fruergaard Jørgensen, who is the acting president also of FPIA. But the one before that, Lars Rebien Sørensen, maybe also some people know that. He's now the head of the board of directors in the Nordisk Foundation. He was the one that said, even publicly, I don't believe in this, but I believe in you. So you can continue with this research. So risk willingness needs to be there. And then the patients, there's something about actually being a scientist and working on something like this, you really got to have patience. I've been waiting 30 years for what we are seeing now, where this is really successful. And then, of course, how do you cultivate that? I think you do that. It's probably difficult to cultivate. I'm from Denmark, right? I think this is a part of the world where we probably have little financial insecurity. So that leads to a situation where it actually doesn't feel so dangerous to suggest something new because you're not so scared of losing your job, right? And then maybe that's something we actually have in Europe. I know we're also very different in Europe, but I do think we have something there where we have a good culture to grow on. But kind of coming back maybe to, there needs to be funding, there needs to be risk willingness, and then we have great scientists in Europe. So if we just make sure that they have the funding and the sector actually thrives, there needs to be both big pharma and biotech and great academic institutions, because sometimes you need the power of the great academic institutions. Sometimes you need early biotechs who can maybe be a little bit more focused and crazy in a good way. But without the big pharma, you probably won't get the translation that you need in order to make products at scale. So funding, risk willingness, and patience.
Very good. Thank you very much. It's a good mantra to keep. Now, expanding to the rest of the panel, I really would like this to be a discussion, let's say, between us. So I might not have pointed questions for you, but generally speaking, especially after what we've heard now, what do you think are the good factors that we have nowadays in the life sciences R&I space in Europe that could make other game changers happen here instead of seeing them happening somewhere else? And maybe Carl-Johan from Karolinska. You're from Scandinavia, so I don't know if you feel the same way about these enabling factors that Denmark has that you also see in your country. But how do you see this? How do you see this playing out from the perspective?
I would say there are many similarities between Denmark and Sweden, with a very strong science base to begin with, and people are reasonably secure in the sense that you dare to take certain risks and don't cling to a job that you may not like or so. Or that may not be available, so to speak. But I also think Europe has, apart from these things, and I can reiterate what you say, it's an attractive place to be for many people, socially and culturally and so. But that's not enough. So the question in this panel is how to create the next generation of game changers. That's one thing. I'm sure we are creating, and we will continue to create game changers, but the question is, will they grow in Europe? So it's not as much, I think, with the fundamental ideas or people, even though we need to, of course, bring in new generations and build new people. It's rather what happens in the next couple of steps. So to move from just creation and move into some type of productification, there needs to be more industry presence, which of course is obvious within a company like Novo, but for things that come out of universities, we need to bring industrial brains and eyes closer to projects so that they become professionalized and reality checked in various ways. And then to really grow things, not only to move them into a product process, then we need to have more demand, I think. So the public system in healthcare, for example, needs to be more willing to test and try things early. And it's more of a wait and see, and then let things maybe become established in the US, and then we start having negotiations on prices and so on. That's why companies rather move to the US, because the demand is enormous, and the price setting is quite different. The US accounts for more than half of all the profits in the pharma industry because of the willingness to pay. I'm not saying we should copy-paste the US fully, but it's obvious that it's attractive for companies to go there. And then something that's been mentioned, which is totally outside the EU system, that is, of course, the willingness to take risk from another perspective, and that is by investors. And we don't have a common capital market. I think that's a very big problem. I've been involved probably in 20 biotech company boards over the years, including several in Denmark, and I've seen again and again and again, when there's expansion time, the money is not available, so people turn to the US, and if you're unfortunate, the company might move as well. So it's really sad that we don't use the enormous pool of money that is available in various ways, in principle, in pension funds and in other structures, and it's idle instead of being used to grow European businesses that come out of science. So that's the first reflection.
Thank you very much, Carl. And then maybe for the other speakers to comment, counteract or agree with this, especially what you mentioned before, so bring in the research and the industry together in the private sector. Here I think three very good examples that can give different perspectives on this, and I don't know, maybe Plamena, if you want to start from the EMBL example?
Yes, I mean, maybe just to mention that indeed EMBL is Europe's only life sciences research performing infrastructure. It's an intergovernmental organization, and it's 50 years old. So that's a lot of experience, and a lot of experience across different, not just time scales, but also different disciplines, and also a lot of different experiences within Europe and the member states. So we have 30 countries that support us. And we were created, and I think this is the wisdom that Europe carries, and one of the good things that indeed we need to nurture, with this really important fivefold mission that brings together academic research, so very ambitious, risk-taking research. This was one of the main, somehow, drivers for the creation of EMBL, to enable very early career researchers to explore the possibilities and the spectrum of discovery, which I think is very important. Goes back to risk appetite, but from a different perspective, perhaps. And then also to collaborate across sectors, so to bring industry, to bring private partners, to bring policymakers when appropriate, and create an ecosystem of trust. And I think this is something that Europe absolutely needs to continue to nurture, these spaces, which don't necessarily exist in US or China, these mature and well-supported European research infrastructures that bring different fields in a very seamless way. And I would argue that the one thing that works is this trust. And it's not trust that it's top-down. Industry comes to collaborate because they know there is benefit. They know that there is potentially a commercial opportunity there as well. And the researchers come and want to collaborate with industry because they have questions that otherwise cannot be answered. So it's a very seamless collaboration, and Europe does this very well. So for me, this is one thing that going forward we absolutely need to support and perhaps expose to new modalities. Philanthropic support, which 50 years ago perhaps was not something that existed, but today we talk about it very openly. Societal impact, how do we combine all of this and add it to this already very rich infrastructure that brings countries from the north to the south, to the east, to the west, and they all agree that this works.
Thank you very much. You were actually kind of called upon, so philanthropic, the need to also bring these other partners in, and from your point of view, what do you see as the added value that you bring nowadays in Europe?
Of course, I thank you for that and for the presentation. And building on my colleagues' comments, I think collaboration among different kind of partners is crucial, and something that is not specific of Europe, but in Europe we do better than other places. And normally the three-piece scheme, that is private-public partnership, we call about that scheme, but normally from the philanthropic sector we try to add another P that we call private, philanthropic and public partnership, because we consider that philanthropy could be this safe space that allow probably public sector to be more comfortable with some private initiatives, and we can deliver that space for safe space for taking risk or the risking some projects. So philanthropy sometimes explaining like a scientific comparison could be as this little catalyst. You know, you have two big amount of reactives, they don't react, but when you put a little amount of a catalyst, the reaction appears. We feel that philanthropy could play that role. But here you mentioned that the two Nordic examples are so close. Probably Barcelona is not so close from Copenhagen from the geographic point of view. But both experience, Novo Nordisk and Lacacia, are similar in terms of governance. In our two cases, it's a foundation who owns companies. This is a really a unique model, and allows us, I think, if you allow me to build in your example, we allow us to use private sector and commercial activity with a more longer term and more close to the social commitment. And we really have studies that shows that way. In a moment that all companies go to the short-term vision, short-term results, to have an owner that allows you to have long-term impact, it's something that, for me, explains part of the success of Novo Nordisk. And I would like also to understand that in our case, that like Aisha is owner of different companies in Spain, and with the profits of that companies, we allowed also to reinvest as a philanthropy. We consider that we can do something that probably in other schemes cannot be done. For instance, the investment in a new research center on immunology that we are pursuing in Barcelona will be something impossible if our combination could be different, because it's something that we will try to build also that public, private, and philanthropic partnership. So the 4 Ps are important in this scheme, and even the philanthropy money could be little in comparison with the public budgets and all the efforts that the private sector is doing. That money allows to do things that in another way cannot be done. So I think this is something different that happens especially in Europe, not only, but especially here.
Perfect. And Gintaras, I mean, you're also from the funding side, so first of all, do you agree with what you've heard so far? And if not, is there anything that you would add or counteract?
Well, I cannot explicitly, of course, and very in-depth make kind of analysis of what was said, but many things I totally agree. I'm representing the Research Council, actually. We are funders. So in many aspects, we work as investors. We invest public money for the public good. And in the previous session, I like a brief comment by one of the participants: value for money. So this refers exactly also to the field of biomedicine, biomedical research, and definitely in biomedical research, the value is obvious. If citizens of European Union and globally becoming more healthy, the value was provided. If they're not, there is no value. So, but of course, being a funder and investor, you count money. It's inevitable. So, and you definitely look for opportunities to invest effectively with minimal investment, maximum output. That's the ideal situation. Not always it's easy to achieve. And looking into the investment field, we see that the major thing in biomedical research in particular and in technology research in general is investing into people. Because as you said, money is one asset, one essential asset for delivering the value for society. Another asset is people, because ideas come from people, not from money. Money is just passive, thing. But of course, if you have people, bright people, talented people who come up with great ideas, we need to find money. So that's where we are, and that's probably where the companies are, because many companies are investing in R&D work. Being a little bit closer, bringing our discussion a little bit closer to Horizon programs, the Commission does the same what we do, and we do what the Commission does. They invest public money, European money, into research and development, innovation, and expect return. So in my opinion, yes, and this is especially important for biomedical research field, many programs which are being initiated and administered by the Commission look at the innovation process as a linear process. So this starts from the fundamental research, then it goes into applied research, prototyping, experimental development to the prototype scaling up, and then the production and implementation of the products. But at least my personal experience and what I see from our partners in Lithuania, both business partners and academic partners, the innovation process is always kind of a cyclical. So you come to the point, then you return back. and then you move forward and you come return back. You came to a phase 1 trial, drug is not toxic, you go to the phase 2, and all of a sudden you discover that it's not efficient enough for the being, accepted as a drug. So you come back and make a research into the disease mechanisms, make a fundamental and applied research which lets you answer the question why this product is not working. So it's a continuous cyclic process which requires to be taken into account when you're designing funding programs. So unfortunately, in my opinion, many programs, Horizon programs, are just fragmented. They target a specific TRL level, what is called this bureaucratic term, technology readiness level. And if you invest into, let's say, TRL 6, 7 is already a first phase 1 clinical trials in biomedicine. So, and you don't care about basic research, most of the investments will be failing because this area is very competitive. Public funds, nothing to compare with private funds in terms of this stage of research. And in many cases, even if the project will be implemented properly, you will not be able to compete with big players. And this is very clearly visible in the field of what is called computational medicine and in medical information, where academy with small companies are developing products. They go all the way through the TRL 7, 8, and then all of a sudden, you discover that there are some companies like DeepSeek, or let's say, let it alone. Let's not talk about this, situation, but then you discover that big companies like Meta, with multi-billion investment into R&D, are working in this field. So what's the value of that investment, which was made with the public money? So I would really think about more about the integrative approach in the Horizon program, where the stage gating, letting many ideas, good ideas, start at the basic level, basic research, applied research, move forward, and then depending on the achievements, on the results, you can pick up the best performers and let them go further. So in this situation, you would probably be able to address this problem of cyclical process of discovery and be more successful in your investment.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a big challenge. But is there any immediate feedback from the other panelists? And we have talked of a lot of topics.
So I would like to maybe add something that hasn't been said. So what does anyone who wants to bring a product to market need? Well, they do need IP protection, and they need regulatory data protection. So that is maybe another reason why we've had a really good situation in Europe. But there are many things that are actually easier if there's only one agency to talk to, or only one place to go, like in the US and the UK. So there's something maybe to discuss on where could Europe, between the countries, harmonize and make some things easier and make sure that they don't take away the competitive advantage, because then funding will not go to Europe, right? Then they will go elsewhere. But I agree with everything you said. Right?
Yes, I totally agree that there needs to be a simplification and lowering of barriers, because even though the barriers may seem small, they take away, let's say, velocity or motion. But I also think we need to think about incentives, because what drives the US largely when it comes to the businesses are incentives of various kinds, and not least for founders of companies, or things like stock options, and the way that things are taxed is highly important. And that's one other reason why many companies move to the US, because they might, probably not very likely, because most companies do not succeed in these stages, but nevertheless, the hope of maybe making more money is important for their decision making. And also incentives for foundations or donors. Philanthropy is a very rapidly growing element of our funding base. Karolinska Institute is a very big medical university with approaching like €1 billion a year in research funding, and there is a mix. The majority comes from various public sources, including the European Union, where we are very large recipients, and then the Swedish government. But then we have philanthropy, which is growing fast. And Sweden has a lot of billionaires these days, US dollar billionaires. And we have weekly visits, sessions, seminars, and they then suddenly, maybe dementia is my thing, or let's say immune system deficiencies, or whatever it may be. So, and then they come in with funding which is interesting because it kind of takes risks in a different way, and it opens up spaces and fields. And then success may follow with other types of funding. So I like your agenda setting role also of foundations, or for that matter, private donations. So I think we need a multiplicity of funding sources to enrich not only the monetary volume, but rather the thinking.
Angel, please.
Yeah, no, I think that we have to realize that in life science sector, innovation is a little bit different than in other technological aspects. And probably the most different one is the time scale. Normally, with what we see is, if today in one of our labs, a researcher says, "Eureka, I have a new discovery, and probably this discovery will be interesting in a new treatment," probably this product will last 12, 15, even more years in arriving to the patient. So it's a long period of time because of all the process that also my colleague has explained. So again, that time scale, I really think that we have to work in shorten that time. And I think technology, changing regulations, and other parts, I think that can allow us to reduce that framework. I really think that developing these new professionals, this new career that I said, transferologist or something like that. So it's that kind of new kind of professionals that they have to know a lot biology about medicine, but also have some legal aspects to allow IP protections to be solved, but also business oriented because they have to attend the market needs, and also to build new organization, build new companies. I think it's a new type of professionals that has to be trained. In this moment, our academia trains scientists to be, mainly scientists, to be researchers, and business people to be oriented to the other part. But these blended professionals that they are starting to have, I think is something that will allow us also to shorten that extremely high period of time. And also to make that bridge between academic science and to accomplish the need of the let's say market, but I prefer to say the people who is with some sickness or like that. I think that we need also money, so we need different types of capital. I like to say patient money because we have to include a lot of patients in that because the time is long, but also because we have to also see that patient people has to be our main target. So patient capital allows me just to include both terms. So I really think that idea of the time, that is not, for instance, in the technological industry. Normally you have time to market is 2-3 years, and in life sciences has to be necessarily longer. But we have to work on that.
Perfect. Let's get to work on that. Now, Bremena, I'll give you the word, and then I will be prepared in the audience because I'm actually going to open the floor and ask if you have a couple of questions for our speakers. But Flavina, please.
So if I have a few seconds maybe just to come in. I think we agree, everyone here, that this ecosystems approach is what we need, and we need to enforce and reinforce across its points because it doesn't work in silos. And in a way, as I said, we're lucky that this has been working for 50 years. Europe has models to prove the concept. Whenever things are in a very nice and seamless ecosystem, they work. When we talk about incentives, and I fully agree with that, but if we agree on the ecosystems approach, we also should, talking about incentives for companies, incentives for funders, The incentives for science, which we all agree Europe has good science, and we may be talking about competitiveness and lacking there compared to the US, but we know that in the fields of biology, physics, and so on, we are leaders. So incentive for scientists to continue delivering on that front should also be considered. And there, what the scientists want, and I've been there in this ecosystem for 15 years, scientists wants to
Do science.
To do science. To do science that is exciting. I think we all agree that the science we're discussing is not science that, we're not talking about mediocre science, we're talking about exciting, risk-driven science with curiosity that is above and beyond. This is what we all want, and I think we're doing this well. So we need to also feed this side of the incentive cycle, right? In order for them, and this brings collaboration with industry and with partners, and this brings the philanthropy. They're excited about these ideas and often come in because they see the potential, but also the people behind it. So in our experience, the philanthropists and of course, we have representatives are also very much motivated by the people behind the idea.
Very good. Very, very brief comment, and then I'll open the floor to the audience.
You really somehow appreciate the driving forces for scientists, which I agree with you is largely about the science. But there are scientists as well that would like to maybe take whatever discovery they made to the next step. And Sweden has a very unusual solution in that sense, and Denmark used to have this for good and bad, or good or bad. It's that the teacher, the scientist, owns 100% of the intellectual property. The state owns nothing. And that's a bit odd, but it's interesting. It was introduced in 1947 by a social democratic government that was thinking about, who cares about this IP? Will we at the central government understand and do it? No. So they said, maybe the scientist does. So it's an outlier, if you see my point. And then we've gone through to look at the patenting intensity of Swedish scientists, of which we knew very little since it's privately owned. So universities know essentially nothing about what goes on. So I had 2 PhD students, and we found out that it was an enormous activity. But then the scientists went and licensed, or maybe set up a company somewhere, but licensed it to big companies, small companies, or set up their own startups. So I think we need to think about, is that a good model, is it a bad model? But anyway, it drives many scientists to take the next step. So I'm just talking about incentives again.
So can I add a small comment?
I think I will have to allow you.
Different
yes.
kind of. So you say that scientist wants to do science. Yeah, I'm not sure I fully agree, right? Because I'm a scientist who only wants to do applied science. Right? I want to make products, and I think there's sometimes a really big discrimination between whether you want to publish or you want to make something that actually becomes a product. And I think working together, we could understand each other more. It's not that we don't publish. I actually have 2 papers in Nature this month, so it's not that we don't publish, right? But it's always with the focus of having a product mindset.
We don't go into the details of science. We agree that whether it's fundamental or applied, the scientist and the driver for this is to do their best in that field. That's what I mean by the incentives, also for the scientists to feel that they can deliver, not necessarily, and I'm not siloing fundamental and applied science. I think we also agree that the silo there is not correct. We've seen this.
You see, I don't have to fear AI. They are moderating themselves, so that's really easy for me. But I don't know if we have a microphone in the room.
Thank you very much. My name is Karen Hain. I'm a consultant, but I'm here on behalf of the Treatment Action Group, which is a patient advocacy organization interested in ending AIDS, tuberculosis, and related diseases and disorders. My question actually is for Angel and Lotte. Both of your institutions have made interesting investments in tuberculosis and ending tuberculosis. And I wondered if it would be possible to share any information about your future plans for those investments. And TAG is particularly interested in the development of tuberculosis vaccines. There may be others on the panel who are also interested. For example, Hindaris, there's, as you know, multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is rising rapidly in Poland, as it has come as well from the instability in Ukraine. Anyway, I won't go on at length, but I don't know if it's possible you could share something about your future investments there.
So I could go quickly on that one because I think you're probably talking about Novo Holdings or the Novo Nordisk Foundation and not Novo Nordisk, the company that is where this is our owner. They invest in all kinds of things where they can see that there's unmet need and an opportunity. So Novo Nordisk, the pharmaceutical company, does not currently have an interest in tuberculosis. We work with many other rare diseases, rare endocrine, rare blood disorders, but not currently tuberculosis.
In our case, because we speak from the philanthropy institution, we have two kind of investors right now. From the last 15 years, we support an institute that is focused on global health, that is IAS Global, Instituto de Salud Global de Barcelona, and they are developing or investing research, fundamental research, especially also in Africa for fighting TBC. I'm not sure that I can explain you the right development that is now. That is, our foundation is supporting that fundamental research on that sense. And in the other institute that I mentioned, the new one that is going to open at the end of this year, that we call Kaiser Research Institute, it will be focused on immunology. So immunology as a new kind of science that we are sure that will be a hot topic in the next 2 decades for the biomedicine. And we consider that going deeper in immunology knowledge will allow us to discover new treatment, both in oncology, infectious disease, even some neurological disorders. So we are convinced that going deeper in that fundamental knowledge will allow us, with that translational focus, to tackle different diseases. In one of them, in our goals, is also TBC.
Hello, Marta Agostinho from EU Life, Alliance of Independent Research Institutes in the Life Sciences across Europe. Thanks a lot for the discussion. I take 3 keywords: ecosystems, incentives, and I think we all agree in the majority of the things, which is very good. I have a question related to what Angel mentioned in terms of we need to shorten the time between the discovery and the patient. And for me, one thing that I see in my institutes that is critical is the interoperability of the data. And I would argue we would need a 28th regime in Europe for data, for research data. Do you agree with that? And most importantly, how do we tackle this fast so that we catch up with the rest of the world?
So data question, is there someone that has, yes, Carl-Johan, and then Lotte?
I totally agree, and it's really hampering not least clinical development, but also other forms of data. But in the health space, there are, of course, ongoing initiatives that may lead to something. Oddly enough, the US, which doesn't have a healthcare system, it has a lot of singular or independent systems, but one main funder until Trump came along, and this was Medicare, Medicaid. So they account for over 50% of US healthcare spending. And Obamacare, strangely enough, introduced some type of standardization requirements for transferability of data. So suddenly, over the last 5 years or 7 years, it's easier to harmonize data within the US because you have to follow export and import standards to electronic health record systems and the like. And we would need that much in Europe, I think. Even within Sweden, it is insufficient.
So I can quickly say, yes, you're absolutely right. And we have very high quality data in Europe, and we should be much better at using them and finding a way where we can share them. I'd say in Denmark right now, we have an amazing opportunity because NVIDIA has invested together with the Novo Nordisk Foundation and the Danish state in a supercomputer. So now we will actually be able to work at a much more compute power, also with data from our healthcare system eventually. I think so that's where we're going. And also I want to mention the blockchain technology, which is a way to actually make sure that you can look at healthcare data, but you can never get them, right? So it's a way to actually make a safe way where also companies can look at data. And I know there's a startup in Denmark that has actually developed such a system, and maybe other countries could do the same.
I think, Plamena, you had raised a hand, and then Angel.
Yes. Thank you, Marta. I agree on this. I also want to, of course, say that EMBL is the world's biggest kind of bioinformatics data resource. The topic of data is very close to our hearts. I just wanted to, not repeating what was said, which I agree, but in our view, and there's indeed a lot of initiatives when it comes to health data across Europe. One of potentially the biggest risks for Europe going forward is also within national systems, because health ministries and research ministries, to begin with, often don't talk to each other. And this is a crucial issue where I think it merits another debate, in fact. How do we overcome this within national systems in order to then overcome it on a more pan-European level? And it's a big debate. Again, a lot of initiatives, but even then one sees that the stakeholders are not necessarily always the ones who need to be in the room. So I would flag this as something for Europe in the future, in the next short-term, medium term, because otherwise I think we will lag behind where we have a lot of experience in data and expertise in the field.
Angel, and then Intras, I have also a follow-up for you.
I was in a meeting last week that an expert on that kind of thing said biology and biomedicine, they are not experimental science anymore, they are only data science. Probably the statement is too hard for me, I really would like to combine both, but it's like the trend is there. And I have to say that we have a lot of challenges there, and some of them has been highlighted, I fully agree. But I think that we have some accomplishment of that, and it's good to also to let us know each other. And I think European Genome Phenome Archive, that is based in the same building that you have your offices, and it's installed in Barcelona Supercomputing Center, that is our European infrastructure that is based also in Barcelona, allows us to have another model that is not the same than the US model, because in this phase there are more federated way of using data. I think that is more closer to European way of thinking, and it's huge. And a lot of scientists they are now using data from other perspectives. The data is owned by the owners, but they can check if that data fits with my research. Of course, there are a lot of challenges. We have to include more probably clinical data to that. But we have systems, we have governance, and we have examples that we can do that kind of things. But so there is a positive message, but also I completely agree that we have a lot of challenges in expanding that collaboration style, or let's say European style of collaboration with data.
Interest me, as a funder, do you have specific requirements or needs for data that you ask the researchers?
Well, data definitely is a new thing, and all other new technologies related to artificial intelligence or molecular biology science, contributing to the speeding up development of drugs, procedures, diagnostics. So, but you need to understand, in order to have a drug, you need to understand how life works. So it's not a game of trial and error anymore, because trials and errors are too long time-wise. And definitely this brings us to the question, what needs to be funded? So from the funder perspective, we always ask this question, whether we need to fund, curiosity-driven science, which delivered to the world in 2011 CRISPR-Cas genome editing system, which produced a brand new area of economy. It's not a product, one single product. It's a segment of economic segment now, which amounts to probably between 10 and 15 billion euros annually in sales. And or we should fund, only narrow gap of TRL activities, which presumably will deliver something. So in my opinion, and our practice shows that you need to do both in a continuous way, integral way. So I believe, that in the next Horizon program, this aspect should be considered. And what is called citizen science. I heard, one of the representatives today from citizen science. Citizens need to participate in planning, in deciding where to invest and how to invest. Plamena said it's about the trust, actually. How can you achieve trust without involving society into planning, where and what amount of money you will be investing? So I believe in next Horizon program, the programming itself should decide whether indeed, useless basic science is really useless. Maybe it's actually the science which delivers the greatest value for society. And of course, I believe if the decision will be made, as we heard in plenary session today, that, basic research will be kind of downgraded in terms of financial capacity. Next program, the Europe will not catch up, with the rest of the world. So in my opinion, the conclusion is invest in basic research, invest in applied research, value scientists not only for the papers in Nature, but also what they can deliver, in the form of innovations. And of course, make, all conditions, legal conditions possible for businesses working together with science.
Thank you very much. Then I have a final question that I just want to let's sit with you, because we're going to have a very short time, so I would like a to the point answer. And the question is, for the next generation of game changers, is European funding the way forward? Now, I'll let that sit with you. And I think there was a question from the audience.
Okay, Rosa Castro from DSW. Maybe it's mixed with your last question, and you can feel free to merge them. But we heard a lot of your, let's say, what will make the changes. I wonder if
Hold
there
the microphone a bit
I
closer
wonder
to
if
you,
there is a way to prioritize all the different aspects that you mentioned, like incentives, the ecosystem, the capital market, like lots of things, legal certainty in the regulatory aspects, etc. Is there a way to know which of these is more important and maybe more feasible for Europe to really make a change? Thank you.
Well, then, yeah, we can try to mix them up a little bit. So in terms also of European funding, is that the way? And if so, where should we prioritize? I don't have any order, so if someone has a first reaction, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to call on you. But I think I saw you almost raising your hand.
I think we all agree that the challenges ahead of us are so big that none of us will probably be too snobby about where the funding, in a way, is it European, is it private? So it requires some sort of a rationalization of what the needs of the funder are, what they can invest in, and then potentially at what level they come in. So where we know it has been absolutely a game changer when it comes to European funding is indeed, for example, in transnational access to infrastructures, where you have assets which need to be these big infrastructures that need to be connected to communities in order to have the talent use the infrastructure. So European funding there has been transformational, and I would argue has to continue in the future, where we see that some indeed fundamental research has been funded by public money also, because the transition to market takes a lot of time. So you need sustainability, and then private funding comes on a different tier, and philanthropic, in our experience, comes sometimes indeed to catalyze something or for something very concrete, very well defined, very kind of clean in terms of a concept, if I can put it like this. So I think just like the ecosystems approach of, that we're talking about, funding also just needs to float in the system without particular barriers where the different funders feel they need to contribute. So we should not be, I'm not saying we should be agnostic about it, but in a way there's an opportunity for the different funding streams at different levels of scientific delivery and innovation delivery in a way.
Thank you very much. I think, Carl-Johan, I think all of you probably have an answer to give, but please.
Well, the European funding has a certain role, of course, but to address your question, there are many levels of things which are totally outside the scope of the EU institutions. So we need to think about the legal, let's say, barrier lowering initiatives that take place somewhere else. And I think also to be less prescriptive and maybe more opportunistic, maybe the wrong word, but be dynamic over the next few years so that we don't decide now where things should go, and then it's the wrong direction. We need to be very adaptive and analyze iteratively, in my mind.
Thank you very much. Then, Anker?
Yes, I think if we define what we are doing as an ecosystem, I think it's really a right. It's not only a fine word. It's an interaction between a lot of systems. So what we need is that this ecosystem will be better connected and larger in terms of capacities. So in that field, for me, it's difficult to prioritize because we have, as also was said, we have to continue investing in different parts of the ecosystem and not allowing one that will be weakened than another. But because of the other question, if I have to say one word, probably will be talent, because for the near future or near generation, of course, we can have the best machines or the best technology, but if we don't have that people that can imagine new things, it will be very, very, very difficult to reach all those goals. And let me go down in a very precise example of that we are in this real moment finalizing a hiring process for new talent for our institute. What I feel, because 1 year ago I had a personal question. Will be a Barcelona institute attractive enough for world-class investigators? Because yes, we are not in Stockholm, we are not in Boston, we are not in California, we are in Barcelona. It's fine.
Which is pretty attractive to me.
It is.
Right?
It is. But my answer right now, the answer right now, because I see the list of people, and we are just in the negotiation. That is that if the ecosystem is working, Europe is. I have to say Barcelona as a European city. Europe is attractive enough, and what we have built in Europe. That for me, I can say a lifestyle, a welfare, a tolerant society, all that kind of things, that allows us to attract people even from America.
Thank you very much.
I'll say something different. Let's continue to think about what Europe is great at and what we can solve some things that maybe could continue to make Europe be really good. So clinical science is something that all countries have. All countries need medical doctors. All pharma companies want to do clinical trials in all countries. But in Europe, it's a little bit complicated because you have to apply separately in every country. So maybe that's kind of like a low-hanging fruit idea that could be worked on, that it could become easier to do clinical trials by one application procedure, because this is something that Europe is really great at, where we could excel if we could tap into all of the medical talent in the many countries and have one unified system. So that, of course, funding, yes, but that's something that Europe really could excel at, I think.
Thank you very much. Gintaras?
Yes, I would like to make a final remark and say that along with those mega ecosystems, a very important aspect is creating a encouraging research environment at the universities, at the institutes, where scientists, innovators would be valued by what they contributed to the society, what they contributed to industrial and social development of the country and Europe in general. So currently, as you know, Europe is submerging to key performance indicators, various type of, quantitative metrics to measure the excellence. And in many cases, these numbers give no information about the excellence, about the quality, about the needs society is putting forward to the research community. So I believe, very important thing at the European level, at the national level, is to fund good teams, good environments, good projects in which the science can thrive and innovators could collaborate with scientists in a very productive way.
Thank you very much. I think, in the sake of time, we have to close here. Then maybe one final remark, if there's any researcher here or online, please continue to do research, not only for the sake of research, it can be for products as well. And if there is a funder, please give them some money. Now, thank you very much to our speakers. I hope that in the next conference we will have another game changer to talk about, but for the time being, I think this was really interesting, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much.